Busyness is a lie, the crisis of modern knowledge work. You are sitting at your desk. It is 5:30 in the evening. You look at your computer screen and you feel completely exhausted. Your eyes are heavy. Your brain feels like it is filled with a dense fog. You have been typing rapidly since 8 o'clock in the morning. You have sent dozens and dozens of emails. You have attended 4 different meetings. You have replied to countless instant messages. You feel like you have just run a marathon. But then you stop and you ask yourself a very simple, very painful question. What did I actually produce today? What did I actually create? And the answer is terrifying. The answer is nothing. You did not write the important strategy document. You did not solve the complex engineering problem. You did not design the new product. You spent 8 solid hours simply moving information from one place to another. You acted exactly like a human network router. You received a message, you added a quick thought, and you forwarded it to someone else. You are exhausted, but you have done no real work. This is the crisis of modern knowledge work. We are confusing being busy with being productive. We are running faster and faster every single day, but we are not actually going anywhere. If you feel burned out, if you feel like your job is an endless stream of shallow tasks, you are not crazy. You are caught in a system that forces us to pretend to work. And today, we are going to expose this lie. Hello, my friend. It is so good to sit down with you again. I am very glad you are here with me today. We are going to talk about something that touches almost every single one of us who works with a computer for a living. We're going to talk about the lie of busyness. We are going to look deeply at why we act the way we do in our professional lives. What this episode is going to do for you is give you the vocabulary to understand your own burnout. I want to validate that feeling of exhaustion you carry at the end of the week. You will understand exactly why your office culture is built around constant communication and why this is actually destroying your ability to do anything meaningful. You might rethink how you manage your own time starting tomorrow morning. You will be able to see the invisible traps that your company has set up for you. Most importantly, you will understand the psychological reasons why we all participate in this collective illusion of productivity. We're going to take a very deep look at the difference between doing real things and just doing stuff. So grab a cup of coffee or tea or just settle in wherever you are right now. We have a lot of ground to cover together. Let us begin. To understand why we are so obsessed with being busy, we have to travel back in time. We need to look at how work used to be measured. In the industrial age, productivity was incredibly simple to understand. If you worked on an assembly line, the manager could just count the number of things you produced. This was the era of the efficiency movement, famously identified with its founder, Frederick Taylor. Taylor would stand next to workers with a stopwatch in his hand. He would monitor every single movement they made, looking for ways to increase the speed at which they accomplished their tasks. In this era, productivity was completely unambiguous because it was simply the number of widgets created per unit of time. You either made more widgets or you made fewer widgets. There was absolutely no ambiguity. Your value to the company was entirely visible. But then the economy shifted. We moved into the age of knowledge work, and suddenly the assembly line disappeared. If you are a software developer or a marketing strategist or a financial analyst, it is incredibly difficult to measure the exact value of your individual effort on any given day. When knowledge work makes complex demands of the labor force, it becomes much harder to measure what an individual is actually contributing to the bottom line. A French economist named Thomas Piketty even studied this problem when looking at the massive growth of executive salaries. Piketty argued that because it is so objectively difficult to measure individual contributions to a firm, we end up with irrational outcomes. The link between your daily actions and the company's success is completely hidden. This hidden space is what we call the metric black hole. Behaviors that destroy our ability to think deeply cannot be easily measured, so their negative impact falls into this opaque region that resists easy measurement. And because we have no clear metrics to tell us if we are doing a good job, we start to panic. We inhabit a bewildering psychic landscape, as some social critics describe it, where managers and workers are made anxious by the vague imperatives they must answer to. We desperately want to prove that we are valuable members of the team. We want to show everyone that we are earning our salary, but we do not have a pile of completed widgets to point to at the end of the day. We have no rack of repaired motorcycles to show as evidence of our worth. So what do we do in the face of this anxiety? We turn back to the industrial indicator of productivity. We adopt a mindset where busyness serves as a proxy for productivity. In the absence of clear indicators of what it means to be productive and valuable, we just do lots of stuff in a highly visible manner. We send and answer emails at all hours of the day and night. We schedule constant meetings. We reply to instant messaging systems within seconds. This behavior makes us seem incredibly busy to everyone around us. If you are constantly roaming around an open office, bouncing ideas off people and sending updates, you look like a crucial part of the operation. We use this visible busyness to convince ourselves and our bosses that we are doing our jobs very well. Let me give you a fascinating real-world example of this. In the fall of 2012, a man named Tom Cochran was working as the Chief Technology Officer of Atlantic Media. Cochran became very alarmed at how much time he seemed to be spending just dealing with email. Being a good technology expert, he decided to measure this unease. He tracked his own behavior and found that in a single week, he received 511 email messages and sent 284. This averaged to around 160 emails per day. He calculated further and realized that even if he spent only 30 seconds on average per message, he was dedicating almost an hour and a half every single day just to moving information around. He felt like he was acting just like a human network router. This realization got Cochran thinking about the rest of his company. He gathered statistics on how many emails all the employees were sending company-wide. He combined this data with average typing speeds, reading speeds, and employee salaries. The result was absolutely shocking. He discovered that Atlantic Media was spending well over $1 million a year just to pay people to process emails. Every single message sent or received was costing the company around 95 cents in labor costs. He realized that this supposedly free and frictionless method of communication was actually costing the company the equivalent of buying a small corporate jet. But because of the metric black hole, companies do not see this massive cost. They just see people typing rapidly and assume great productive work is happening. The reality is that we are wasting enormous amounts of time and energy on behaviors that mimic productivity but produce no real lasting value. We are exhausted precisely because we are doing work that does not matter. Now here is where it gets very interesting. If all this constant communication and busyness is actually bad for the bottom line, why do we keep doing it? Why do entire industries continue to operate this way? To understand this paradox, we have to look at the psychological rules that govern our behavior in the workplace. The most powerful of these rules is the principle of least resistance. This principle states that in a business setting, when we do not have clear feedback on how our behaviors impact the bottom line, we will naturally tend toward the behaviors that are easiest in the moment. Think about a culture of constant connectivity, where you are expected to reply to any message within minutes. Why does this exhausting culture persist? Because it is easier. It makes your life easier in the short term. If you can simply send an instant message to a colleague and get a piece of information right away, you do not have to plan your day. If you could not rely on that immediate quick response, you would have to be highly organized. You would have to map out your projects in advance, anticipate what you might need, and figure out what else to work on while you wait. Planning your time intelligently is very hard work. It is much easier to just run your entire day out of your inbox. You just sit there reacting to whatever new missive arrives with alacrity, feeling satisfyingly productive without actually doing any deep planning. We see this principle everywhere in corporate life. Consider the incredibly common habit of forwarding an email to a colleague with a short open-ended question attached at the top, such as the word thoughts. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Someone sends you a complex issue, and instead of processing it, you just forward it with the word thoughts. It takes you only a handful of seconds to write, but it might command many minutes or even hours of time and attention from your colleague to work toward a coherent response. You do this because, from your perspective as the sender, it is the easiest way to clear a task out of your inbox with a minimum amount of energy invested. We are systematically passing the cognitive burden back and forth because it is the path of least resistance. There was a brilliant test of this exact problem conducted by a Harvard Business School professor named Leslie Perlow. She studied the Boston Consulting Group, which is a high-pressure management consulting firm with a deeply ingrained culture of constant connectivity. She convinced the executives to let her fiddle with the work habits of one of their teams. She forced each member of the team to take one full day out of the work week completely off, with absolutely no connectivity to anyone inside or outside the company. At first, the team fiercely resisted the experiment. The partner in charge was suddenly nervous about telling her client that the team would be offline. The consultants were equally nervous and worried that they were putting their careers in jeopardy. But the outcome was fascinating. The team did not lose their clients. The members did not lose their jobs. Instead, they found more enjoyment in their work, better communication among themselves, and most importantly, they delivered a better product to the client. Yet, despite studies like this, companies still resist disconnecting because constantly checking email is simply easier than restructuring how work is actually done. We also have to talk about another massive factor driving this culture of busyness. It is what we can call the cult of the internet. We live in a society that assumes anything related to high technology or the internet is automatically good. A communication theorist named Neil Postman warned about this back in the early 1990s as the personal computer revolution was accelerating. He called this culture a technopoly. In a technopoly, we stop discussing the trade-offs surrounding new technologies. We do not ask if a new tool introduces new problems to balance its efficiencies. If it is high-tech, we simply assume it is good, and the case is closed. An author named Evgeny Morozov calls this internet centrism. We view the internet not just as a set of cables and routers, but as a seductive ideology. We idolize digital tools as a signifier of progress. Because of this ideology, businesses force their employees to engage in highly distracting behaviors just to appear modern. Consider Alyssa Rubin, an incredibly serious and talented journalist. She was the New York Times bureau chief in Paris, and before that, she reported from the front lines on the post-war reconstruction in Afghanistan. She writes deep, complicated, hard-hitting articles, such as investigating the French government complicity in the Rwandan genocide. Her value to her employer is her ability to cultivate important sources and do this intense, focused work. Yet, she maintains a Twitter profile where she regularly posts small, shallow updates. She apparently receives reminders from a dedicated social media desk at her newspaper to appease her followers. Why is a serious journalist asked to interrupt her deep thinking throughout the day to participate in shallow online chatter? Because in an internet-centric technopoly, you are not allowed to question these tools. The alternative, to ignore the internet, is seen as invisible and irrelevant. When another novelist named Jonathan Franzen suggested that serious writers should not use Twitter, he was widely ridiculed and treated like he was completely out of touch. People treated his statement like desecration instead of a debate. Deep, focused work is actually at a severe disadvantage in our culture because it relies on old-fashioned values like craftsmanship and mastery, which are the exact opposite of the high-tech distracting behaviors we are taught to worship. This creates a devastating paradox. The modern business world actually promotes trends that actively decrease our ability to perform meaningful deep work. Let us look at the open office plan. Big tech companies praise the open office because they believe in the theory of serendipitous creativity. They think that if everyone is sitting in one giant room without walls, people will bump into each other and share brilliant ideas. Mark Zuckerberg famously built the largest open floor plan in the world for Facebook, housing thousands of employees in one massive 10-acre space. Jack Dorsey did the same thing at Square, claiming he wanted to encourage people to teach each other new things by walking past one another. But the reality is that these spaces create massive distraction. Neurological studies show that even a phone ringing in the background ruins what you are concentrating on. When Gloria Mark, a professor of informatics, observed knowledge workers in real offices, she found that even a short interruption significantly delays the total time required to complete a task. Yet, companies continue to prioritize rapid communication and forced collaboration over the profound ability to go deep. Let us bring this all the way down to earth and look at your actual daily life. How does this crisis of busyness show up for you? Think about how you start your typical morning. You probably open your laptop and immediately open your email or your company messaging app. You are instantly flooded with requests. You spend the first 2 hours of your day responding, putting out tiny fires, and coordinating schedules. You attend a standing status meeting. You then try to find some time to do the actual work you were hired to do. You have a complex report to write, but your instant messenger is always active. Instant messenger systems are actually designed to be always active, which magnifies the impact of every single interruption. A software developer in San Francisco explained that the most efficient employees in his company actually program their computers to flash an alert on the screen the moment a new comment is posted in the company chat system. They proudly jump over to the chat with practiced keystrokes, type a response, and jump back to their code with barely a pause. People think this speed is impressive, but neurologically, it is an absolute disaster. The human brain cannot switch contexts that rapidly without paying a massive cognitive penalty. Let us look at another scenario. Let us say you are a manager in a medium-sized company. You might genuinely convince yourself that you are most valuable when you are able to respond instantly to your team. You see your role as preventing project logjams, so you stay connected every single second of the day. You believe you are enabling the productivity of others. But this is a dangerous trap. This goal does not actually require attention-fracturing connectivity. You could solve the exact same problems with one highly structured daily meeting. By choosing the path of constant interruption, you are robbing yourself of the time you desperately need to think deeply about the broader strategy of your team. You are trading deep value for shallow responsiveness. And consider the terrible pressure to be constantly visible. Because you use busyness as a proxy for productivity, you feel terrified of being away from your keyboard. Marissa Mayer, when she became the CEO of Yahoo, famously banned employees from working at home. She made this controversial decision after checking the server logs for the virtual private network and noticing that remote employees were not logging into the servers enough times throughout the day. She was essentially punishing her employees for not spending more time checking email. She signaled that if you are not visibly logged in and busy, she will assume you are not productive. This creates a toxic culture of paranoia. You might be sitting on your couch, reading a complex technical document that requires absolute silence and intense focus, doing the most valuable work of your entire week. But because your chat status shows you as away, you feel deeply guilty. You feel the constant urge to move your mouse just to keep the little green dot active. This is madness. This is treating knowledge work exactly like an assembly line. But extracting value from information is an activity that is often completely at odds with visible busyness. If you work deeply, you are not visibly busy. The personal consequences of this lifestyle are severe. The constant attention switching online has a lasting negative effect on your physical brain. A communications professor at Stanford named Clifford Nass studied people who multitask all the time in the digital age. He found that they simply cannot filter out irrelevancy. They cannot manage their working memory. They initiate large parts of their brain that are completely irrelevant to the task at hand. He flatly called them mental wrecks. The terrifying part of his research is that these chronically distracted people actually believe they can focus when they really need to. They told Nass that when they really need to concentrate, they just turn everything off and become laser focused. But the science shows this is a complete lie. They have developed habits of mind that make it impossible for them to be laser focused. They have become suckers for irrelevancy. If you spend your days acting like a human network router, Constantly refreshing screens to relieve the slightest hint of boredom, your brain is fundamentally rewired. You lose the physical capacity to do hard things. This is why you feel so incredibly drained. You are forcing your brain to fight desires all day long. The desire to check a notification, the desire to surf the web, the desire to take a break from hard work. Fighting these endless temptations drains your willpower pool until you have absolutely nothing left. We need to zoom out now and look at what this means at a larger scale. This is not just a simple story about poor time management or bad email habits. This is a story about the tragic loss of human potential. When we build a business culture that rewards shallow busyness, we are structurally destroying the environment necessary for real breakthroughs. Think about the truly great innovations in human history. They do not come from people who are frantically answering emails while sitting in an open office. Let us look at the late Nobel Prize-winning physicist Richard Feynman. Feynman was a recognized genius, but he was also very strategic and ruthless about protecting his environment. He explained in an interview that to do really good physics work, you need absolute solid lengths of time. It needs massive uninterrupted concentration. If you have a job administering anything, he said, you simply do not have the time to do the physics. So Feynman invented a brilliant defense mechanism. He created a myth for himself that he was actively irresponsible. He told everyone around him that he did not do anything. If someone asked him to be on a committee for university admissions, he would refuse, claiming he was completely irresponsible. Feynman fiercely avoided these administrative duties because he knew they would only decrease his ability to do the one thing that mattered most in his life. He had absolute clarity about what mattered, which gave him the permission to ignore what did not matter. If Richard Feynman worked in a modern corporate office today, the human resources department would probably fire him. They would put him in an open office, demand that he reply to instant messages within 60 seconds, and force him to tweet about his physics research to build a personal brand. The modern working world is profoundly hostile to the monastic focus required for true mastery. We have replaced the deep, quiet satisfaction of creating something beautiful with the shallow, noisy anxiety of maintaining our network status. We elevate all things internet into an unquestionable ideology, completely forgetting that deep work is what actually pushes society forward. There is a profound philosophical cost to this shift. In the past, people found a deep sense of meaning in their work through physical craftsmanship. A blacksmith shaping a sword from a block of crude metal spends hours in a state of absolute depth. Every single strike of the hammer requires complete, careful attention. The craftsman finds a sense of the sacred in this deep, quiet focus. The philosophers Hubert Dreyfus and Sean Dorrance Kelly argue that cultivating this kind of extreme skill allows us to uncover meaning that is already present in the world. They explain that the task of a craftsman is not to generate meaning out of thin air, but to cultivate the skill of discerning the meaning that is already there in the material. This meaning is not limited to old-fashioned physical trades. A modern computer programmer writing elegant, rough, beautiful code can experience the exact same sense of sacred craftsmanship. One coding prodigy noted that beautiful code is short and concise, much like writing a beautiful poem. But achieving this craftsmanship requires deep work. It requires pushing your brain to its absolute limit to hone a skill and apply it at an elite level. When we instead spend our days dealing with the shallow concerns of office politics, spam emails, and scheduling conflicts, we rob ourselves of this fundamental human meaning. A science writer named Winifred Gallagher discovered that our brains construct our worldview based entirely on what we pay attention to. After she received a terrifying cancer diagnosis, she realized that she could choose to focus her attention on the good things in her life rather than the disease. She found that skillful management of attention is the key to improving virtually every aspect of your experience. If you dedicate your time to deep, important endeavors, your mind will understand your world as rich in meaning and importance. But if you spend your day focused on the shallow, frustrating, and trivial interruptions of an inbox, your mind will construct a world dominated by stress, irritation, and triviality. Even if the shallow things seem harmless, an idle, fractured mind tends to fixate on what is wrong in life instead of what is right. We are biologically wired to find happiness and satisfaction in deep flow states, where our minds are stretched to their limits to accomplish something difficult and worthwhile. The psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi proved this by paging people throughout the day to track their moods. He found that people are actually happier at work than they are relaxing, but only if they are engaged in deep, challenging tasks that create a state of flow. By replacing deep work with the lie of busyness, modern society is practically forcing us into a state of chronic dissatisfaction and spiritual burnout. We have to finally recognize that the rareness of deep work in our offices is not due to some fundamental weakness of the habit itself. We embrace distraction for arbitrary reasons based on flawed thinking and the terrible ambiguity of knowledge work. We have built a world where depth is systematically punished and shallowness is constantly rewarded, even though depth is the only thing that actually produces lasting value in our economy. We act like human network routers because it is easy, because it is visible, and because everyone else is doing it. But it is slowly destroying our minds. We have journeyed through the architecture of a modern illusion, uncovering how the loss of clear metrics led us to embrace a frantic, highly visible busyness. We have seen how the path of least resistance and the uncritical worship of technology turned us into exhausted human network routers. We explored the devastating neurological toll this takes on our brains, creating chronically distracted mental wrecks, and the philosophical tragedy of losing the sacred meaning found in deep craftsmanship. The burnout you feel is not a personal failure, but the natural physical response to an environment that forces you to fake productivity. This week, I invite you to conduct a ruthless audit of your own schedule. Look at your tasks and ask yourself, how many of them could be learned by a bright college graduate in a matter of weeks, and how many truly require your hard-won expertise? Begin the process of reclaiming your attention, because as we have discovered today, a deep life is truly the best kind of life. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today, and I look forward to thinking with you again soon.